the personal defense turrets are going to be getting a pretty significant nerf in the next patch. The details of this nerf are currently on the screen right now. It seems like the goal of this change is to make the personal defense turrets more oriented towards killing torpedoes and missiles, as opposed to warding off enemy fighters, since torpedoes are also getting their health reduced to make them easier to kill and to compensate for the personal defense turret nerf. No doubt there are some people that are quite happy about this, as PDTs have been a very big source of ire amongst the light fighter community. And honestly, anything that makes those mutants upset is probably good for the game. Unfortunately, the people who enjoy flying in larger multi-crew ships are unable to be on the internet 24/7 and argue in defense of their preferred class of ships. And since multi-crew ship owners have work in the morning, the incessant autistic focus of the light fighter community has finally led to enough bitching and complaining that the PDTs are receiving a significant nerf. In theory, I would be okay with this change, especially if it came with something to sweeten the deal, so to speak. Like, for example, we made turrets, which logically should be the counter to anything attacking the multi-crew ship, if turrets were just made more effective. But that's not the case. Turrets remain worthless. And since turrets remain worthless, the PDTs just looked that much better. They were always hitting, they were accurate, you got close to them, they locked onto you, they would fire, and they would drive you away. And let's make no mistake about it, that is all PDTs would do, is drive you away. If you were in a fighter and you were attacking a capital class ship or any ship that had PDTs on it, you had to make a choice to allow that ship's turrets, the PDT turrets anyway, to kill you. Because it took a long time for those turrets to kill a light fighter. I'm actually playing right now in the background footage of testing that I did pre-nerf of how long it took PDTs without any evasion or anything like that to kill a light fighter. At any point in time, a light fighter can leave this engagement and not be killed by the PDTs, which again brings me back to the question, why were they nerfed? You might say it was for PvE, right? Maybe they nerfed it for PvE encounters. Players taking a Polaris or an Idris out to do bounties or to do anything that generated income, and they would park it in space and let the PDTs do the work and kill whatever was attacking it. That's not going to change anything, because none of the PvE encounters are capable of killing the capital ship. So it's just going to take longer for the player who's doing this to just solo farm, I guess, high tier encounters, if you can call them high tier, good lord. But you know what I mean, right? So it's not preventing that from happening. So in reality, what this nerf is actually doing is allowing the light fighter to stay within range of the PDTs just a little bit longer before they decide to leave. And that's what really boggles my mind about this. What was the intention behind this change? What problem was it trying to address? Because it's not stopping PvE farming, and it's just making it more possible for light fighters to harass capital ships. Is that the intention of the change? If so, it would be good to maybe illustrate that, to be a bit more transparent about why that's happening. For many years now, I have felt like SIG does not understand multi-crew ships, and they do not understand the type of player who wants to be inside of a multi-crew ship. I also feel like they do not understand why turrets need to be powerful and why the multi-crew ship needs to be a bastion for players who do not want to learn how to be a light fighter sweat. There's currently nothing in this game for those sorts of people. In theory, multi-crew such as turret gunnery and engineering and damage control and all that stuff, that is in theory the alternative to being an elite light fighter pilot. But in reality, that alternative is not feasible. Turrets do not work, engineering looks tedious and boring, and the game doesn't reward any form of multi-crew gameplay in any way, shape, or form. Missions have shared rewards, so if you're doing missions in a group, you're actually getting less of a reward for doing so. Having all of your players in one ship is actually a massive risk, as opposed to having all of your players in individual ships with individual amounts of HP and firepower and maneuverability. To sum it all up, it's the same thing you all probably know. there is no incentive and there is no reward for me ever to participate in multi-crew gameplay. Yet, every time something happens, usually by accident, like the PDTs being somewhat effective, and I'm going to put effective in quotation marks, somewhat effective against light fighters, it eventually gets changed because the light fighter community will get together and complain incessantly about something, whether it's on Discords with CIG devs or Spectrum or Reddit. They'll just complain forever because they are terminally online. Simple as that. Any short amount of time on the Discords where all the quote-unquote elite flight players hang out will show you that. And unfortunately, there are devs on those Discords as well. So the developers are exposed to an endless barrage of this complaining. Thus, the developers think that it's a problem. Curiously, on these Discords, there is a complete and total lack of multi-crew enjoyers and turret aficionados out there complaining to the contrary of turrets. There are a few, and a couple guys who come to mind, but they are dwarfed by the amount of unemployed light fighter pilots complaining about PDTs. But again, in reality, PDTs, not very effective at killing the light fighter, very effective at driving the light fighter away. There is this very big misconception that I want capital ships and multi-crew ships to be a solo experience. That's not the case. That could not be further from the truth. I just want an effective multi-crew experience that rewards a group of players putting themselves in one ship and working together. I want that experience to be powerful. I want that to be the definition of Star Citizen space combat. I no longer want single-seat light fighter combat. I do not want PvP to be a mishmash of light fighters calling targets and attacking people in some giant furball. I want the definition of Star Citizen space combat PvP, or even PvE, to be about large capital ships and how players on those capital ships, or any multi-crew ship for that matter, interact with one another. Crew skill versus enemy crew skill. I want that to be the determining factor in who is the best at PvP and Star Citizen. Is that biased? Is that selfish? Absolutely, because that's what I like. That's what I want. But the light fighter community is biased and selfish in their own way. They want all the light fighter glory, which is understandable. That's what they like to do. But I think that for most people, the idea of a fleet of capital ships rolling up on one another, or even just a couple capital ships, and the players who train and drill on their stations and train and drill on how to maneuver and position turrets and do damage control and do all this other stuff for each other as a unit, as a group, as a cohesive group. I think that sounds more appealing and more fun for most people than being told to get into Arena Commander and practice flying the Gladius or the Arrow for 128 hours until you quote-unquote get good. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like SIG or Star Citizen is that kind of game. It has been a half-assed solo-seat space combat game for a very long time now. And despite having all of these big ships with the potential for this big PvP, this big group PvP, it's never been realized. Simple changes like buffing turrets are abstained from. They're just not done. Instead, if you are a proponent of multi-crew, what they give you are extra layers of complexity for no real reward. And that is my issue with the whole idea of engineering and fires spreading. Because you're having this tax placed upon you and upon your preferred style of gameplay for seemingly no reward. So now not only do you have ineffective turrets, a slow ship that does not dictate the fight, a massive target that can be swarmed and shot down because PDCs are no longer effective and turrets suck, you now have to contend with having to have an engineer playing with knobs and dials. Then you have to contend with putting out fires that spread along the ship. Then my question would be, for what? For what benefit? It just perplexes me that multi-crew ships, which are already not effective, continue to get nerfs over and over and over again, whereas light fighters and other single-seat ships continue to get buffed. Multi-crew ships are in no way, shape, or form dominant in PvP. Not at all. They never have been. Even with the new Paladin, which is a good ship, it still suffers from the same multi-crew issues. However, SIG will continue to piss on your shoulder and tell you it's rain in regards to multi-crew ship design, and the uninformed SEALs will clap their hands because they have been distracted by seeing something as simple and redundant as engineering without thinking about the greater picture and how ineffective their ships actually are to begin with. Multi-crew ship owners will not ask themselves, what is the benefit of this? What am I getting out of this? How is this making my experience more effective? And that's the key word here, effective. How is it making it more effective? They're not going to ask themselves, well, what do I get in return for giving up my PDTs? Are my turrets going to be better? Is my ship going to be impenetrable? Am I going to be able to disengage from any fight I do not want to be in? What is the trade-off here for me losing this one thing that I have that prevents light fighters from absolutely annihilating me? They won't. They won't ask any of those questions because they're stupid. SIG will dangle the chain with the keys in front of them, and they will be happy. They'll think, oh, look, this is great. It's just like Star Trek, or it's just like The Expanse, or whatever sci-fi show slop that they're watching at the time. Meanwhile, they will continue to be farmed mercilessly by light fighters. The multi-crew owners who defend these types of changes and continue to put up with this are truly the most stupid and disgusting of cattle in the Star Citizen universe.